What's going on, people? It's Black Zen. Today I'm going to be showing you how I record in FL Studio. These rules can be applied to any DAW, but if you're struggling finding that sound in your DAW, I got you. I'm going to go over topics such as gain staging, the importance of tracking things out in the mixer, and so many other concepts. Also, before I forget, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop comments below about your favorite techniques in FL Studio. If you want to take your music a step further and learn more about how to take control of your music, subscribe to my Patreon. Without further ado, let's get to the video. If you don't already have it, I recommend buying FL Studio. Get the all plugins edition because FL Studio, unlike a lot of other DAWs, gives you free lifetime updates with an appropriate license. Like for example, with FL Studio 20.9, FL Studio dropped a lot of really good plugins, and if you have access to all of them, you never have to worry about buying more for your DAW outside of, sample packs that you may want for like Flex or something. There's many DAWs: Logic, Ableton, Pro Tools, GarageBand, Reason, Cubase. The list can go on forever, but just find something that you can stick with. I wouldn't suggest learning all of them. Focus your time on one of these DAWs. For me, that path began with FL Studio, and it's gonna stick to that path. Alrighty, what's going on, people? So we're gonna start by opening up a project file. So I make my own custom project files, and what I do is I like to map out my playlist with the recording channel rigged here, hook 5 spaces in between, hook leads, and then the verse leads hooked 5 spaces in between, because when you're recording, chances are those are going to be the 3 things you need immediately. You need a channel to record, you need something for your hook vocals or your verse vocals, whichever you're going to start the song with. But chances are you're going to start with the leads. With no leads, how are you going to get backgrounds? You know what I mean? You can, assign whatever you need after that. But this is essentially what you need in all situations with recording vocals. I like to have my input set with this recording channel right here. It's rigged up, channel 3. You see right here? If you look in the hint menu at the top left, the hint panel, it says audio track linked to mixer track 3. Same thing for the hook. Mixer track 17, verse, mixer track 11. So in this recording channel, I go to this button right here, and you see it's on post EQ. I'm going to set that to external input only. Well, after I press my input. For me, I'm using a Focusrite, so my input's going to be 1 because that's the channel that my mic is going into. All right, so now that I've selected input 1 as my audio input source, I'm going to press this, and right now by default it's set by default to external input only. This is very important because when I'm recording, I do not want to have any effects baked into my audio. Imagine if, as a music creator, you're a producer, you're an engineer, you're a rapper, singer, whatever the case may be, you essentially are cooking, right? That's like a term we use in the music world. Oh, I'm cooking up something. When you're cooking, you go to the supermarket to get ingredients, right? You're not gonna buy cooked ingredients when you're trying to cook something from scratch at home. That wouldn't make sense. So you're gonna record with the external input only, which means that it'll default to take audio directly from the sound card in my external interface only. External and mixer input will default to using the external audio plus the mixer input. We don't want that. Post effects basically means anything in these slots. We don't want that. This thing, Edison, is just like another recording tool. You could just keep it muted for now. It doesn't matter. Post EQ includes this equalizer built into each mixer track in FL Studio. Post level and panning. Level is basically when you modify the fader. Panning is this panning knob right here, where you can pan vocals left to right. Then post track, basically everything involved in this track. So when you're recording, like I said, with the whole cooking analogy, you want your vocals to be raw. Now let's get into the mixer tracks. So with these mixer tracks, I like to have them all bridged out to buses. So as you can see on the bottom, right, there's this down arrow that leads to something else, rec, right? It's going to master, and it's also going down here all the way through to these effects. The reason I do that is because even though I'm recording, sometimes, you know what I mean? Sometimes you need some vibes, you need little things mapped out. So you put these here. I do that for all of my vocals. I do that for everything in my mixer. So you see these things going down here. What are these? These are sends. So this sends the signal from one source track into another track. So why is this useful? When we look at verse lead 1, right here, verse lead 1, mixer track 11, this is hooked up to the effects, of course, but it's also hooked up to verse lead vox bus. This bus is an aggregate channel where verse lead 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all hooked up. As you can see, verse lead 3 and 4, you might see the difference that these aren't hooked up to the effects. That doesn't matter, because for me, when I'm recording lead vocals, if I'm using more than 2 lead vocals for my verse, I'll just go to verse lead 3 and enable it. You highlight the track that you want to be connected, right? You go over to the next track, and right here, if you can see in the hint panel on the top left, enable send from verse lead 3 to echo. Boom. Right? That's all you got to do. Nothing too major. So for now, I'm just going to disable these. With the mixer, having everything mapped out is very crucial, and it's very important for organization. When you're recording, you want to be as organized as possible. So these buses, for example, end up going to, I'm just going to close this window off for now. You just, press this and you can hide whatever's docked to the right. This bar right here hides what's docked to the left. And if you want to know how to hide how to dock something to the left or right, you simply right click the track, dock to. Right now it's in the middle. This is the middle. See, this is the middle. All these things here are in the middle. All right, I can keep going. I'm in the middle though. This is left and this is right. These bars divide the left and the right. I'm gonna hide those for now. So verse lead 1 goes to V lead vox bus. This ends up going all the way to verse vox bus, along with these other elements like the highlights, the ad-libs, bridge vocals, hook, so on and so forth. And I put break channels in between just to kind of make it easier visually, and it's all, color coordinated. Nice and easy. When you're recording, you first off, you set the input, which we did. I'm gonna open this back up. Check. Next step. Check this thing right here. The setting, external input only, check. We check the mixer track, we're good. Now we look at this playlist link. I have this preset in the template that I made. My recording and FL Studio project templates will be available to certain Patreon members. If you're interested in my templates, description below, you'll see the Patreon tiers. But let's say I didn't have this, right? Track mode, unassigned, and I'm gonna delete this straight up. Delete. How would I set this? I go to track 1, right click, I go to track mode, audio track, and I'm gonna press rec. So it's linked to that, right? That's a very important step because all vocals that'll come through here will be routed here. Anything that I record, you just drag it in to the appropriate spot and it'll automatically be sent to that exact same channel. So if I recorded something right now, it would, and I just, let's say this thing I recorded, pattern 1, right? This is my recording. Grab this control F2, rec vox. Oh snap, ec vox. Let's fix that. Not ec vox, rec vox. Essentially, these recorded vocals would come here, then I would drag it down here, and then it would be sent to mixer track 17. And the thing is, if I brought it down here, it would overwrite that and then send it to mixer track 11. That's how it works when you have things mapped out here. Same thing for rec. It'll go to rec to mixer track 3 when you drag something into rec. By default, all vocals recorded will be sent to rec track 3 because it is the recording channel for this project. Once the playlist is linked, we're going to talk about gain staging next, right? You want to set the gain. What I'm going to do is, first off, I'm going to arm this for recording. So now I have audio. La 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 la. Whoa 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 whoa. You can see the level right here. Fun fact, in FL Studio, this C stands for current. Whatever highlighted track you have, whatever track you highlight, that C will broadcast the levels of it in decibels, and I can see the levels right here. Ideally, when I'm recording and I'm setting my gain, I want the higher end in terms of volume of what the person is recording or myself is recording to not pass -6. If it goes to -5 or -4 even, if they're super loud, that's okay. We can work with that. We do not want the vocals to be recorded anywhere near 0 because the vocals will be clipped. That will be baked in to the track, and that will be bad because you cannot take that out. With recording, you want everything raw, like vegetables and fruits and ingredients when you're cooking. You want everything raw for you to cook later in post. If I was recording, I would look at the level right here and go, that's perfect. Oh. That's fine. I'm at -6.09. That's cool. I also try to keep in mind not to record too low at the same time. So if I'm recording and I'm at -6, ideally I don't want my volume to dip down -13, -14. So just keep that in mind when you're recording, or if the person you're with is recording, that you want a bit of consistency. You don't want too much dynamic range. That big fluctuation is what you would call a huge dynamic range. Dynamic range is simply the difference of the highest highs in terms of volume and the lowest lows in terms of volume. So when I'm recording, I'm not planning on doing something like this. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And you know, that's way too much dynamic range. And that's not good recording practice, so try not to do that. So once we have the gain set up, we're gonna head over to our options, audio settings, and we're gonna tweak this thing called buffer length. You can see right here I have mine set to 256. This is giving me 6 milliseconds of latency. 6 milliseconds is workable. There's also 192, right? 192 is even better because you get 4 milliseconds of latency, and you can keep going further and further and further. But the less latency you have, the higher the likelihood that your track will click and pop and crackle. The lower the buffer length, less latency. Higher the buffer length, more latency, but more processing to prevent those clicks and pops and crackles. Whenever I'm setting this, I disable any effects that I have going on. So for example, right, in verse lead 1, let's say I had all these effects enabled. My echo, my compressor, my de-essers, my auto-tune, all this stuff was enabled. I would simply press this button right here and disable it. That way I can minimize the amount of work my computer has to do while I'm recording. And the thing is, I'm recording. I don't necessarily need this unless I'm listening to those vocals. But personally, I don't mind hearing my vocals that I recorded previously raw. And then when I'm done recording, I simply turn it back on. Easy as that. We set the input already. We have the mixer tracks mapped out. We have the playlist linked up to the mixer. We've done a little gain staging. We know the levels that we're going to be recording at. We set the buffer size. We disabled plugins that are going to cause latency. The next step is going to be checking out this recording button. I'm going to right click this and I'm going to disable automation. What we're recording is audio. Notes are fine. That's for MIDI. I'd leave that on by default because I'm not really playing MIDI while I'm physically recording vocals. You can, I don't recommend it, but if you want to and you're like a live musician, that could be a very useful tool for you. Clips, you just keep that on. Automation will wreak havoc, and I will say why. Automation in FL Studio is abundant. any knob you tweak in any plugin, any wet, dry knob, even toggling this button, you can set automation, right? You can set binary automation, meaning 0 and 1. This is a mute solo toggle. Toggles are binary. So basically in the automation, if you set it to 100% to 50%, that's on. 49% to 0% in the automation is off. These faders have their own automation. By default, it's at 100, and when I press this, it's going to say 80%, because that's just how FL is. 80%. And that gives you more room to raise it up to 100%. The 100% in this sense would be you raising this mixer all the way to the peak of what it can go, which is 125% of the volume. This is 100% in the automation clip. While you're recording, you don't want any automation. Any button you press even by accident will now have an automation clip assigned to it. And that's just an extra step that's unnecessary, and you can do that later. So disabling this kind of helps prevent you making accidents while recording. Once you get that set up, then you can set the vibe with effects. But hold on, son, you just said don't record with effects. Remember, we're recording with the external input only, so in this particular track, I can add effects. Prior to FL Studio 20.9, I would just have these effects routed to this effects channel at the side and simply add it from here. Prior to FL Studio 20.9, the preferred way would be to just route your recording track to an effects track and simply just turn up the wet signal. What you can do now, because of this knob with the external input only thing, you can now add effects directly to the channel that you're recording out of. I personally don't do that because it's cool to hear yourself and know what you sound like and know the input of your voice without all the extra effects. When you're recording, you want to know your instrument. And if you're not recording yourself, but you're recording somebody else, a client or a friend, you want to still understand their instrument as an engineer. You want to know what they sound like without all the bells and whistles. A lot of people like to record with effects, but at that point, it's like, do you really know your instrument that well? The best vocalists that I've met so far, the most skilled ones, have no problem recording their vocals dry because they know their instrument. From there, they can figure out what they will sound like with more effects. So that's why you always want to keep that in mind. The next step will be to simply record. For me, I use the hotkey R. R basically enables yourself to record with these recording filters in mind. If you're pressing R and nothing's coming up, chances are you have this knob turned on, typing keyboard to piano keyboard. What this does is basically turns your keyboard of your desktop or the keyboard of your laptop into a MIDI keyboard. This is cool if you don't have a MIDI keyboard or an external controller and you want to play some notes and whatnot, and you don't want to just pencil things into the piano roll. But when you disable this, you access a slew of shortcuts, right? So if I press T, for example, with this disabled, I'm going to get the toggle for mute. You see? When I press C, I get the command for copy, right? When I press B, I get the brush. When I press P, I get the pencil. So this is very useful. So when you're using this, you press R, now you're enabling yourself to record, and you can see the command in the hint panel, R. So I'm going to record some quick stuff. I'm just going to turn the metronome on so I know what I'm doing. And if you're ever looking for shortcuts and hotkeys and everything, you simply hover over a button and it'll tell you the hotkey for it. Let's record some vocals, I guess. Hey, 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 you know why? Oh, 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 oh. You're probably wondering, what happened? Why didn't it record? This happens to a lot of people. You always want to record in song mode. And it's like a simple mistake, we all make it. But just remember, if you don't see your cursor, if you don't see this little marker, something's wrong, right? The quick way, if you don't want to constantly go over here and press pattern song, you can press Control L, or you can simply click a point on the playlist timeline and it'll just, enable the song mode. It'll just know that that's what you're trying to do. It knows. FL Smart. Yeah, so let's record again. Torches and stakes don't strike no fear in me. No, there's no rest for the wicked, I get it. So I became what peasants are afraid to be. Huh. But I'm on down, drinky gal now. Yeah. Okay, so as you can see, the vocals have recorded. And it's recording with this name in mind. New project, happy face. Because that's what this project in particular is called. 2022, which is the time, so year, month, day format, and it tells you the specific time of recording. So yeah, that's how you record in FL Studio 20.9. This is the way I recommend to get the maximum efficiency with your recording. If you haven't already, remember, subscribe, like, become a patron of my Patreon if you want to get one-on-one help, if you want to stay in the loop and get resources that I give only to patrons who support my channel. So let me know. In the meantime, you can still check out my channel for free videos. It's still all love, even if you're not a patron. We're going to be dropping a lot of resources for you. Any questions, hit me up in the comments. It's fine. Oh, and heads up, I'm not telling you what plugins I'm using. That's for patrons only. Bye-bye.